Hello again. So today we have a 12.9 iPad Pro that had a broken display. And as you can see, it's cracked right here, and the crack stretches all the way across the screen here. And so we're going to replace this with a brand new display. However, as you will see on the back here, we have this cable here. This is kind of like a daughter board slash cable that plugs into your logic board of your iPad Pro. And this controls the, this goes to the LCD itself, this cable here. This cable here comes into and plugs into the backlight that goes in for the LCD. And on the back side of this board here, it's soldered onto these cables along the bottom, which is your digitizer. So it combines all three of these functions into this one board, kind of like two cables here that plug into your logic board to control these features. However, when you get your new display, it does not have that board. It does have the backlight cable, which is part of the display. It does. Then you're missing this cable here that plugs into the LCD, and of course it's not soldered on to the back of that board. So what we're going to have to do here is move this cable over to the new display, and I was going to show you how to do that and give you a few hints and tips to things to look out for, so that we can not cause any damage to the new display, and hopefully make this repair go as smooth as possible. I've done this a few times here, and I've learned a few things, a few tips to make it go faster, and I was just going to share that with you guys. Alright, so first of all, we have to remove this cable from the board, or from the back of the display. So first off, we're going to lift up this cable. I can show you under the microscope so you can see a little bit better. So first of all, we have to unplug this cable here, which is your LCD cable. Let's see if I can get you a view through here as well so you can see what we're looking at. Alright, so we're looking at this cable here, and basically all you have to do to unplug this is this little flip bar here flips up, and then the cable just pulls out like that. So that's that, and you do have to fight with some adhesive along the bottom of the cable here that's onto the back of the LCD. I've already removed that. It is a little bit easier if you have something like a flat tool, because when it's on and you lift it up, you can kind of scrape along here and remove that adhesive from the back of the display. Now for the backlight cable, you'll see that plugs in here pretty much the same way. It's a little bit different cable or connector. This big part here flips up like that, and it pulls out just like so. This one does have a little bit of adhesive, so before we unplug it, we're just going to lift up the cable. And it doesn't matter if you tear this cable, because this goes with the old display. It doesn't come off, it doesn't transfer, so you don't have to worry about that if you tear it on the bad display. You're going to be fine. Alright, so we have that unplugged. So just to keep this connector safe, we're going to push that back down. Now, to look at the back side of this board, you will have to gently pry on through the back of the connector like this. Let me zoom in so you can see. Have to pry on the back side of the board, and it will eventually lift up. And these digitizer cables is also got adhesive along the back side of the display here, so just have to watch out for that. Then flip it over, and so here we have the back side of the cable. So what we're going to do now is just remove this tape, and as you'll see, there's tape here as well. I'm just going to remove this tape. And this is going to expose the area where it's soldered onto the board. Just like that. You can see there's a lot of connections here that have to be soldered on both sides. So in order to remove this from this board, what we're going to do is, let me lower the brightness down a little bit so you can see better. Now we're going to add some lead-free solder, or leaded solder, to the back of this board on these connectors. So let's go ahead and do that. Make sure we're focused. Alright. So before we add the solder, we're going to add some flux to these areas. Just enough to cover the connector. Like that. And we're going to add some leaded solder. I think my tip is going bad because it took a long time to heat up. Usually it only takes like 4 seconds. Alright, so we've got leaded solder onto there now. So we're going to get this flat tool and we're going to slide it underneath the digitizer cable. No pressure added, just enough so when we start heating this up, it's going to lift up the cable. As you'll see, this flat tool will start to slide in, and we can turn this over so I can start prying on it just a little bit. Get a little more solder on my tip. It is important to have kind of like a bead of solder like that, so there's more surface area that you're heating up. And there we go. We have separated that from the board. Now let's move over here to the next side. Alright, there we go. So we have removed the board now from the display, the old display. So now we're going to clean up this board, make sure the joints look okay. And get it all cleaned up so it's ready for the new display. We want to make sure this area back here is really clean because we want that cable to lay flat as possible onto the board. Add some more flux. I'm going to have to open another tube of flux here in a little bit, almost out. Alright. Just like that. Okay. And it's okay to leave this solder on these pads here, because when we put the new display on, we're going to lay it flat on top of this board, and I'll show you how the new cable is designed. There's little holes in each pad so that the solder will flow through onto the cable. And just a little tip here, you see these square pads on each side of the connector. You don't want to get solder on those. If you do, it's okay. It's just a ground pad. But I'll show you what they're useful for here in just a moment. And it's best if you don't have solder on them to be able to use them correctly. Alright, so we're going to clean this connector up. Use a microfiber cloth and alcohol. That's what I like to use. Cleans it up nice. looks pretty clean. Okay. The reason this pad looks weird right here, it just has a little bit more solder on it than the rest of the pads, but it's okay. I'll show you why in just a moment. So now we get the new display, and we're going to remove all the tape here that covers the connector. There's tape on the back side. Remove that. Tape on the front side. Remove all that. Okay. So the board actually sets on there like this, with the connectors on the top side. So in order to get this on there like that, we're going to have to flip over the board and the connector to be able to solder it on. These pads look dirty, don't they? On the new cable. It's alright though, so once we add flux and everything, it should flow just fine and connect. Alright, so what we're going to do now, I'm going to flip this over because I work better this way. So we have the display laying face down, and we're laying this digitizer cable down like this. And we're going to slide the board under like this so that we can connect it. And once it's soldered on, the whole thing will flip back on to the display. Alright, so now let's go ahead and add some flux onto the board where we soldered the pads, nice and clean solder joints. Just spread that flux around just a little bit to make sure we get all the pads covered. Okay. And now we're going to lay this down. So you remember those square pads that I was telling you about? Those right there on each side of the connector. So as you'll notice on this new cable, there's this clear pad right here on the end. So what you're going to use that for is to line up the connector. You see how they show up through there? You can see it light up that clear pad basically. And once you get it lined up in the middle of that square, you know that your connector is lined up nice and straight. So get it lined up. And then what I'm going to do is just press a little bit. You see how the flux squeezes through the cable? You have those little holes. And then I'm just going to tack one pad on each side of the connector. And by tack I mean just solder one pad. We're just getting it to hold in place. Okay. Touch. Like that. And the pad is soldered. I move down here. Get that lined up. And we're going to touch one pad up here. Like that. Okay. So we are tacked on both sides of this cable. Now let's go ahead and tack this cable down as well. Squeeze that flux through the cable. We're going to tack one side of this. Like that. And then tack the other side. Like that. Okay. Being very careful because there's adhesive on this cable. If I pick up my fingers fast, I'd probably rip the pads off. Alright, so now we're just going to go down the line and tack and solder each one of these. To do this correctly, what you need to do is have like a flat tool or some tweezers to press down on the pad next to the pad where you're soldering so that it's pressed firmly against the board. Work our way down each pad like this. Remember, we have solder on those pads below on the board, so that's the solder that's squeezing through. Every now and then clean off your tip on your soldering iron to make sure it's able to transfer the heat properly. Well, it takes a little time to do this because there's so many pads, but it's important to take your time, make sure you get each one connected, because if you get one that's not connected, it's going to be fun to go back and solder them all again to figure out which one's not connected, because you can't tell by looking at them usually. Okay, I believe we have all of them. Now on to the next cable. I think that tip has gone bad because it's heating up my whole handle. So I'm going to replace this tip. Actually, I'm probably just going to start using the micro pencil for now to finish this job. Sorry about this. Plugging in the micro pencil here. Alright, so what we're going to do now, as it heats up, we're going to add some more flux to these pads. And I am going to add solder on top of all these pads, just to make sure we got a good, solid connection. I like to start in the middle of these and work your way out. Just like so. And when you get to the end, it's important just to press down with like your tweezers or something, just to make sure that the cable's not lifting up. Alright, that cable's done. One more. Some more solder. Alright, and cable 2 is done. Okay, now we're going to clean up the cable before we flip it over. Get our microfiber cloth again, get some more alcohol, and wipe it down nice and good. Okay, I think we're all good. And now what we're going to do, we're not going to use the microscope anymore, so just let me zoom out on the camera here so that you can get a better view. Alright, so what we're going to do now, put this out of the way. So we have it all soldered and everything. Before we flip it over, what I like to do is put like a double-sided adhesive on the back of that board. I have a roll of double-sided adhesive here and just cut off a little strip of it. About like that. Down the board, and then that way when we flip it over it sticks to the new display nice and good. It's not going to move around. Alright, so before we adhere this to the display, it's important to plug in this cable. Make sure it's in there straight, and then make sure that we have no slack in that cable. And then once you get that down, you can press the board down. Because the reason for doing that, if you flip it over and put the board down and then your cable doesn't reach this connector, you'll then have to lift your board back up. You run the chance of damaging your board. So it's important just to go ahead and plug that cable in, get all the slack out, and then stick it down in place. That way you don't have to move this board anymore. You know this board is set up and ready to go. So now for the backlight cable over here, you see how it's just laying here loose. It has an adhesive strip on the back of it here. So go ahead and remove that, and then it just flips over and plugs in to the connector like that. And once you got that straight, press it down, press the adhesive down so you know it's not going to go anywhere, and then gently just slide it over like that. So now that cable's in place. Now for the digitizer cable, we just make sure it's running flat along the bottom of the display. Remember, this has adhesive on it. Push that down in place, and then same way over here, make sure it's running straight. Just press it down firmly, and we're good to go. Now all we have to do is plug in the display into the iPad and give it a test. But we are pretty confident that our solder joints are all there because we took our time on each one, made sure that the solder flowed through, made sure that they were getting covered in solder, and then went back over it a second time with some fresh solder to make sure that all of our joints were completely covered with solder. So we should be good to go. Now we just got to install it and make sure everything's good. So I hope this helped you out. If you do buy a new display, a lot of times it's going to come without this cable or this board, and you have to transfer it over. So that's a little fun to do. But I hope this video helped you out in knowing how to do that. Hope to give you some hints on what to look out for. And if you have any questions, make sure you can post them down below in the comments. Alright, have a great day.